Okay, so welcome to Unsung Books. My name is Nina, and today we are looking at The Altered Remains by Isaac Hess and illustrated by Nick Fiore. So let's get the obvious out of the way. This cover art. So, bravo for having original art. Like I said in my previous video, I don't like stock art, and this somebody actually did. Like, they sat down and they drew something specifically for you. At least that's what I'm assuming, because I've never seen this before. So that's awesome, first of all. However, in my opinion, less is more, and your background really isn't doing anything to help out. So in the foreground, you've got this red fabric and a symbol on it, which could easily be interpreted as a representation of some reigning regime, and I definitely would get that impression, but the background sort of jumbles that up. I have no idea what the background is supposed to be representing, how it's supposed to tell me about the story. Now maybe it does come into play, but honestly, as far as first impressions go, you could have just had an entire red cover with nothing but this symbol and the title, and I think it would have spoken a lot more than all of these colors splashed on the back that don't really do anything. So, nothing against the artist. The artist can definitely do some things. It's just that what the story you're trying to tell and this cover art might not be congruent. But let's see what the audience says. We're gonna go through the synopsis right now. So last time I read the entire synopsis and then gave my criticisms. This time I'm actually going to stop occasionally and give my criticisms as I go, simply because this synopsis is a bit longer and I don't want to bring up stuff that you might not have any idea what I'm talking about unless you go back to that paragraph. Alright. In the distant future, superpowered humans are forced to live their lives in secrecy under a cruel new regime. Oops, see? The lower half of that cover is paying off. The new human sovereignty. Called remnants, they must try to survive in the face of overwhelming forces, poverty, and near extinction. But there is hope. Okay, so first criticism, and it's not even really a criticism, it's just something I think is worth mentioning. When you make superpowered humans the oppressed class, you need to establish immediately why that is. Because by nature, superpowered humans can kick the ass of regular powered humans. So why on earth would they not be running the show? And maybe you do have an explanation, but this just happens so often in fiction where you just see superpowered humans for some reason not being on top when they should be. Like, if you can fucking freeze flash somebody, then why aren't you the president of the fucking world right there? Like, that right there is power. And, by that alone, you would have people wanting to be on your good side. It doesn't make sense by itself. It needs context. And I'm afraid that people would be rolling their eyes when they read this. Superpowered humans being treated badly simply because they have superpowers. So the inside of the book might be fantastic, but at this first paragraph, I just found myself thinking of all of the superpowered fiction that has come out and how this should not be a thing. But who knows, maybe there's only 6 superpowered humans and 6 billion regular humans, and I guess that would overwhelm anybody. Let's keep reading. Teth and Pyra, 2 teenage siblings and remnants, are getting by. Their lives aren't easy, but they manage to make do with what they have. When a simple mistake drives them apart, Teth must do whatever it takes to get his sister back. Oh, that's sweet. Oh, I love this. I actually should have asked, but is it pronounced Pyra? Or Pyrrha? Because it could go either way. And I suppose I could stop and ask right now, but I actually want to make a point about this. If her name is Pyra, I really hope that her superhuman power is not fire. Like, on paper, you would think that that would make sense, giving somebody a name that reflects what they can do, but honestly, it's silly. It's very silly. Our parents name us, and just the idea of a parent going, oh, look at our flaming child, let's call her Pyra. I wouldn't do that. But again, I'm making an assumption, and this is less for the author and more for anybody listening to this who happens to be thinking about doing just that. Okay? So, yeah. Pyra is not a gym leader. So, she doesn't need to have a name that reflects her Pokemon type, okay? Next we have Royce. Royce, a new recruit in the Hunter Guard Corps, a task force designed to hunt down remnants, is assigned his first post. His heart isn't in the job, and he must decide where he really stands when right and wrong collide before his very eyes. Okay, so Royce isn't going to have much of a story here if he chose the side of wrong. So we already know that he's going to choose the side of right, and that's going to complicate his life. And that's fine. The problem is the paragraph really doesn't tell us much about why we should be interested in his plight. And there's a lot of interesting things that you probably came up with. I'm not sure, but you basically should say something like this. After double-crossing his core, after he finds out what passes for good, he finds himself forced to be allied with the enemy. And without superhuman powers, that's actually quite difficult, not having the resources that I assume the Corps does have. On top of that, he will inevitably invoke suspicion simply because he's not one of them. And right there, I'm not giving away any story elements right there. You don't know what happens, but you see problems that Royce is going to have to face. Right in the synopsis, right there. And so now I'm invested. I kind of want to know how you get around that. I mean, how would you fight on the side of, say, the X-Men if you didn't have any powers but believed in what they were trying to do? Even the X-Men, the movies anyway, don't really address this kind of thing. A normie getting with them and trying to fight back, fight against the power that be that keeps them down. How would you even go about that kind of thing? And Royce would be in that situation. That is intriguing. I think that's worth exploring. That's worth teasing the audience with. Next we have Eve. Eve, a shapeshifter, set out on a quest for revenge against one of the most powerful men in the galaxy. Too little too late, she realizes she is way over her head. So it's really appropriate that I brought up X-Men because I can only think of Mystique when I read this paragraph, and that's not a bad thing. Mystique is not the only shapeshifter in fiction, nor should she be. But you've got a lot of elements that just remind me of another character, another well-established character. And if you want to do that, that's fine, but you've got to make her really stand out as either different or better than the person we're thinking of. I don't know whether you did or didn't do this, but I just don't want you or anybody listening to this to regurgitate a story that's already been told. Putting Mystique in space is not going to make things better. So I really, really, really hope that you did something amazing with this character, because if you didn't, that might turn people off of the book before they even finish it. We're down to the home stretch. On an icy planet in the middle of nowhere, Madeline Mad and Taps Cobb are soldiers in the United Revolution, a rebellious force that stands against the authoritarian New Human sovereignty. When they are ambushed, Madeline is forced to make decisions which will determine the fate of the squad and the fate of the revolution itself. Together or alone, they must face whatever comes at them, for family, for friends, for country, for revenge, or for their very survival. All right, so that's the story. I will say that it isn't until between midway and the end of the synopsis that I'm even aware that space travel is a thing. I mean, you say distant future, but that doesn't mean space travel in my mind automatically. Maybe to some people it does, but to me, I didn't consider it space travel, so suddenly space is involved. And I think that is a sign that you need to establish the universe that this is set in. Because by the first two paragraphs alone, I did have the impression that we were just in a really distant future that is reminiscent of Tank Girl's future or Mad Max's future. Like, those are the vibes that I got initially. But now that I know that we can go in space, that makes the story even more flexible and gives our heroes, I think, more resources to defend themselves. And it just puts my mind where you probably want it to be in this story. So, I don't know, a little preceding paragraph just to establish that we are in space, and not only that, but this is going on and stuff. You've got so much about the characters, but not that much about the universe. And honestly, I think both of those things are very important. Speaking of characters, these are a lot of people. I mean, it's not too many people, and I know that this is only book 1 of your series. The problem is that I'm looking at a word count of 230 pages, and you're trying to establish Teth, Pyra, Royce, Eve, Madeline, and Taps in one book in 230 pages. Maybe you do pull that off, but honestly, this seems like a very character-driven story, and I want to get to know the characters, and I know that you do want to keep people dangling and wanting more, but if you fail at getting us to connect with these characters in this first book, I'm not saying nobody will read the second one, I just don't want you pissing off people. It's just so short with such a big cast that you want to get into stuff with. And I don't know. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't, but that's just one of the concerns that I thought of when I saw all of these names, all of these people in one book that is only 230 pages. So finally, and I saved this one for last because it is a big thing, what the hell is an altered remain? Like, when you title something, even if it doesn't make sense initially, your synopsis should always explain it, in my opinion. And that's usually where authors take the opportunity to do just that. I am left not knowing why your book is called what it's called, and maybe inside the pages it is explained, but really, I strongly suggest that you either explain this book title in your synopsis, or when you happen to do a re-release, retitle it something that is explained in your synopsis. Your book is about remnants, so it can be called The Last Remnants or The Final Stand of the Remnants, something that reflects what you are saying to me. I know that sounds weird to say, but I mean, that's basically the short and long of it. So there are a lot of criticisms in this video, but I mean, none of them are really that big, and honestly, half of them aren't even exclusively for you and more for just people who are trying to do what you're doing. So I wouldn't let this discourage you, because if you re-released with a cover that actually was more reflective on what was inside the book, then I think that you would get more people interested. I mean, there's an entire genre that is interested in just space stuff, but I don't even know that this is about space or takes place in space until the end of your synopsis. So make those few changes, re-release, try again, and who knows, you might do a bit better with just presentation alone, and your guts could be absolutely fantastic. I hope this helped, and anybody else who wants to send me their links to their published books, by all means, email me, send me a message, let me know that you're interested in being featured, and I will be glad to have you on. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Isaac, and thank you so much, everybody else who tuned in.